want to begin with a short story, how I first met Professor Yigal Ginat, who just spoke earlier. I don't even know if he knows this, but 22 years ago, the first time I ever worked in the field of mental health was in the, 22 years ago.
When you were in kindergarten.
I was 22 years old. 22 years old, and I just finished my army service in the traditional South America trip. That was the place we used to go then. Now it's, I understand, the Far East. And I worked in the local psychiatric hospital, which is in the neighborhood where I grew up in Talbiya in Jerusalem. And the director of the hospital was Yigal Ginat. And I worked as a sort of a madrich, I guess, which is sort of an aide. Instructor makes me think about the university, so I think as an aide, counselor in the adolescent ward for about 6 months before I started my schooling. And it was a very interesting and exciting experience for me, which really got me very interested in all this. And we used to go with the folks that were in the ward, and had this lot of enthusiasm. I had more energy then. And we did a newspaper on the ward. There was a music room over there, and we wrote songs with the folks. And I thought that we were doing all these great things, and there were a few other young people who were aides. And then I went off, moved to Tel Aviv to start my schooling. And during the last few weeks there, I realized that all these adolescents whom I felt very connected to, they were just a little younger than I, that they're all going to be staying there, and I'm moving on with my life, and what did this all mean? And sort of the whole experience, which I felt so positive, made me start thinking, wonder what it was worth, if anything. And there was this parrot, Tuki, a parrot that was in a cage in the corner, which was totally ignored, and occasionally people would remember to feed the little parrots. And I developed this obsession that at least I was going to do one good thing. I was going to free this parrot. And I had these fantasies how this parrot was going to, take wings and fly. And not only was I young, but I was also romantic and quite stupid. And in my last shift, that's precisely what I did. I took a chair and climbed up on the table and took the parrot and let the parrot out of the window. And I thought this was my symbolic ending. And the ending was that what I thought I saw, but I wasn't sure, I checked and went downstairs and saw the poor parrot dead. He didn't have wings. I didn't realize that. He had no wings. And he basically fell out the window and died. And I don't know if you know about this or not. For me, it was a terribly traumatic experience, not to mention the poor parrot. But it was, I got a letter from the Arale, who was the administrator who said that it was sort of the joke. It wasn't enough, fear of suicide and so on. And so there's also this young guy killing this parrot. And I got a letter, a formal letter. I still have the letter until today. I saved it from Aryeh, who was the administrator responsible, and he said that I owe the hospital a parrot. We compromised on an old organ I had. I was afraid to get near the hospital. It was such a bad experience. But I learned a lot about rehabilitation and about being more patient, even though he still accuses me that I'm not patient enough, and about processes and about the importance of wings and so on. So that's a little history from the neighborhood in Jerusalem. Okay. Now I know. Okay, so that's. I want to share a few concluding thoughts and remarks about these last 2 stimulating days. I'm thinking a little bit about the future. First thing that strikes me is about the future generation. The future generation, the future people, and I think this was emphasized time and again in terms of trying to reach people early on, and the RAISE project that Bob shared with us that's beginning in the United States, and other efforts, the issue of young and trying to prevent the long-term effects of hospitalization and so on, or long-term care, which Yigal just mentioned here. And so that seems like a very important aspect. And if we think about it, actually the law that we've been talking about so much it's only starting 18. And if we know, as far as I know, at least that usually the schizophrenia develops, for example, more between 15 and 25. The question is, what about the younger group, and how do we intervene then in an effective way and keep them as much as possible within their routine and within their daily life and activities, and prevent the whole issue of patient identity? So that seems like an enormous a challenge that we should be thinking of, as well as also staff and people in terms of working. And I feel very privileged that I had the opportunity last few years to direct and be involved in the development of our Department of Community Mental Health, and always makes me delighted when I come to places like this and I see folks from the department and I feel their energy, which keeps my energy going, and the capacity to have relatively young people acquire values and knowledge and skills that seem very relevant to what we're doing. And I think that the advice also that Bob was talking about was trying to identify partners at a young and early stage before their career has already, sort of socialized them to specific roles and ways of doing things is an important goal. The second thing I'd like to emphasize is the importance of moving out. And I feel encouraged both by the recent efforts that I think we've all been explicitly making in terms of parting from that very tempting, somewhat righteous position of being the good folks and blaming the bad folks. And I think that's, and there may have been historical dynamics which required that, at least temporarily, until we were able to acquire and establish our identity as a separate identity. But I think we've exhausted that. I think we've done some harm by staying there longer than perhaps we should have. I think our field and what we're doing is appreciated and respected enough, and we have a better sense of what we're doing, that I think the time is super ripe to go out there and and start building those bridges. And I think we're welcomed, we're needed, and we also need these alliances to move ahead. And in that regard, it also relates to learning what's going on abroad and being less suspicious about that, and not feeling that we're this small community that sort of, that there is what to learn. I think we've all, and this, people express it in a variety of ways over the last 2 days, feel that we've learned a great deal from these last 2 days, from experiences, about research, about different interventions, about policy. And these are serious questions which we're all dealing with. No one really has the answers, but people can share and we can learn from their experiences. And I think this exchange can be and is extremely enriching, and I hope it continues. We have had the privilege, in addition to our 4 guests that were here for this conference, to host a number of distinguished persons over the last couple of years. Bruce Link was here, Paul Lysaker was here, we had Pat Corrigan here, Marianne Farkash, Shula Ramon, all these people in the last few years, and I think that, I know Pat Deegan was here about 15 years ago, I think that was. And and I think all these things, we should keep them up and keep on learning and keep the exchange going. The third thing, I only have 5, not to worry. The third thing is regarding to information. I think there's growing recognition about the importance of information. We're working with very limited information. We're making big decisions, important decisions, based on little information. And I think in order to have a fair, more parity, and a more explicit and open system, we need to learn much more about the people that that we're supposedly and trying to develop the best services we can to facilitate what they're trying to do in life. And in order to do that, we need more information. We need information in terms of clusters, what kind of things we've learned helps and doesn't help, and hopefully this move that's also been mentioned and efforts to advance that is reaching the point in which we're getting closer to do that. And it was great to have folks over here for several discussions and discussing ways and possible things that may be important to that effort. The fourth thing is that I think it's important that we do maybe try to use what we've learned now, the energy that I think and the interest that a lot of people felt during these last 2 days. 10 minutes from now, each person, or a little bit later, I mean, you get too hopeful, that people will be out and back in their busy lives. And the question is, how do we restore something from this? How do we take some of the things that we've learned and try to start planning and discussing and systematically thinking about ways we can benefit from these in order to improve tomorrow? So thank you very much.